Regardless of how Joe Biden does tonight or who is on the top of the ticket come November, one thing is crystal. Democrats' policies are hurting Americans.
We should remember that. It is his incompetence, and frankly, every single Democrat walks in lockstep with the philosophy that has made our economy implode, that has allowed 10 million illegal immigrants to come across our border, allowing the spread of cancer called crime in the poorest inner cities in this nation. That won't change if it's Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, or any other Democrat name that's been circulating right now.
For more, let's bring in the Deputy Communications Director for the Trump campaign, Caroline Sunshine. Caroline, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. So what's the take of the campaign? Again, America's going to watch tonight. Can Joe Biden actually have a redo after the debate from a couple weeks ago, or is he going to stumble again? What does the campaign want to see happen here?
What a demoralizing 2 weeks for the American people. I mean, it has been 2 weeks since that debate to end all debates, as I call it, because President Trump did not just win that debate, he absolutely dominated it. And you look at the fallout, it has not gotten better for Joe Biden. You are looking at cleanup on aisle 5, 6, and 7. He's lost both Georges, George Clooney and George Stephanopoulos in 1 week. We have had to sit through day after day of it just not getting better. Of course, that is the truth that the American people have lived for the last 4 years. While, as you pointed out, the liberal mainstream media and Democrat Party have concealed this from the American people. They have concealed from the American people that their own commander-in-chief is unfit to serve. We are talking about the commander-in-chief of the largest military in the world. We are talking about the commander-in-chief and leader of the free world, who is very clear, like I said, completely unfit to serve. Look, you just contrast that with the past 2 weeks that President Trump has had, which I think are the only source of relief and hope for the American people. President Trump has raised more money than ever. He's been back out where he wants to be, which is with the American people, speaking directly to their concerns. And he just was intricately involved in passing a new platform for the Republican Party dedicated to the forgotten men and women that, yes, we know Joe Biden doesn't remember for a lot of reasons, but also the men and women that Joe Biden, the Democrat Party, and the liberal mainstream media abandoned a long time ago because they love power more than they love this country.
Caroline, they're really hoping, and I say they, not just people who are still standing by Joe Biden and Hunter and Jill, but they're all hoping, the Democrats, that they can make it till the convention starts, the RNC, and then make it about President Trump. They're hoping that there is something that they can latch onto, the media as well, and make the news cycle about Donald Trump again. That's really what they're hoping for, because they can't make it about policy, and they don't want to talk about the cover-up scheme that's been afoot for the last 3.5 years.
The cover-up scheme, exactly, that they are all 100% complicit in. Look, I don't think the American people are worried about 4 more years of Joe Biden. I think they're worried about 4 more months of Joe Biden, maybe even 4 more hours of Joe Biden, as is very clear is the Democrat Party. The American people are smart. They do not forgive and they do not forget. These are the same people who, for the last 4 years, said Joe Biden's fine, he's doing cartwheels, he's doing backflips, never better. You have George Clooney coming out saying, hey, look, the guy that I saw at that fundraiser a couple weeks ago, yeah, I knew. Okay, George, then why'd you give him $14 million then? By the way, that same fundraiser, right, that George Clooney attended with Joe Biden, that same fundraiser where those videos emerged of Joe Biden having to be babysat on stage by Barack Obama, when our campaign shared those videos, raw, unedited, truth for the American people to see with their own eyes, they were dismissed as cheap fakes. Don't believe your lying eyes, Americans. Like I said, the American people are smart. They saw the truth on that debate stage, and they have been watching for the last 4 weeks as this is a party in free fall. This is a party with a candidate that is in free fall, and nobody else that they can put up can beat President Trump. I think it's time for Democrats to pack up and go home.
Before Sean picks this up, you talked about people lying for Joe Biden. Jared Bernstein, the social worker, has a PhD in social work, who's one of the architects of this disastrous economic policy, said today, quote, Joe Biden is sharp as ever, just to highlight the lies that come across their lips. Go ahead.
Listen, what I find interesting here is the Democrat Party has been running on abortion, but also democracy. And democracy means you have elections. They had a primary election, and Joe Biden won. So there's a conversation amongst Democrats who believe in democracy that they should kick Joe Biden out. He won the primary. He's the guy. Double down on democracy, Democrats, and keep them in place. That you made a mistake. That's your fault. You lied to the American people and to Democrat voters. But I want to pivot to this because the tables, they certainly have turned when it comes to fundraising. The Biden camp used to love bragging about all the money they've been getting. Well, look who's laughing now. Not only has Trump campaign outraised Biden in the second quarter by more than $60 million, Biden donors they're disappearing. One Democrat bundler telling Fox, quote, people are starting to tap the brakes a bit. They want to see how things are going to play out. What does this mean for the campaign? Again, it's not all about money, Caroline, but money does matter. To organize and to get ads on television, this is a big deal for the Trump campaign.
Oh, that's right. Well, the message from donors to Joe Biden is we want our money back. By the way, that's also the same message from the American people to Joe Biden. They want their money back, too. Wages have been stagnant. Inflation, we've seen inflation, at levels like Joe Biden somehow makes Jimmy Carter look like a lightweight. The American people would also like their money back. Look, we're not having that problem. Like I said, President Trump on that debate stage, the contrast couldn't have been clearer. And within hours of that debate performance, President Trump raised a record amount of money. By the way, it's not just the amount of money that we're raising. Long before that debate, the only people who were left donating to Joe Biden's campaign were the George Clooney's of the world, the most out-of-touch liberal people this country produces, who are now the same ones saying, you know what, I think that $14 million may have been a mistake. We are having the exact opposite problem. President Trump is raking in millions of dollars from the forgotten men and women of this country. Mm-hmm. It's not just about the number. It's about that we're seeing small dollar donors from across all 50 states in our country donating to our campaign because they, like President Trump, realize how high the stakes are for this country. And they know that President Trump is the only one, as the stakes are higher than ever, who can make this country wealthy, safe, strong, and great again.
Bidenomics only made the rich richer. It further enriched the elitoids and the ruling class. Meanwhile, real disposable income fell 6.5% for working men and women. So they have money to burn, the Clooney's and his ilk. Before you go, Democrats are now trying to tie President Trump to Project 2025, which he has very clearly said he has nothing to do with. But that will not stop them from fear-mongering over it. Listen to this.
The hard right is done speaking in euphemisms. They're smelling blood. They're saying it straight to our faces. If you can disagree with Donald Trump, watch your back. It's bone-chilling. It's un-American. It's dangerous for our democracy. The Trump manifesto is an autocrat's dream. If MAGA Republicans get the chance to act on the Heritage Foundation's ideas, the damage to the America we all know and love may well be irreversible. We'll never get it back. Our children and our grandchildren will live in a less grand country than we have lived in. The destruction would be unthinkable, and it would betray everything America has represented for 248 years.
Caroline, what do you say to Chuck?
Oh, Chuck lies like he breathes. I don't need to hear another word from Chuck Schumer on who is a danger to democracy from the same people, like I said, who for the last 4 years have told the American people, Joe Biden's great, sharp as a tack, doing cartwheels. Meanwhile, we all knew the truth. They've concealed it from the American people and let this country go to hell in a handbasket because they love power more than they love this country. Look, President Trump said it best himself, as he usually does. He has nothing to do with Project 2025. Doesn't know about it. Some things he likes, some things he doesn't like. Unlike Joe Biden, when President Trump has something to say, he's very clear about it and people know exactly what he means. Look, these people are pushing yet another disinformation host because it's another day that ends in Y. They lie for a living because this is their only election strategy left, is to continue to lie about President Trump. Meanwhile, like I said, you look at that platform that President Trump was directly involved in shaping, dedicated to the forgotten men and women, who is who he has been fighting for since he came down that escalator in 2015. their priorities, his priorities couldn't be clearer as reflected in that platform. I would say the Democrat Party probably should rename their platform Project 2025, because if they are allowed to keep governing the way that they have, we won't have a country by 2025.
Donald Trump is not afraid to give his opinion on all kinds of issues. Maybe the press team sometimes says, let's not talk about that, Mr. President. But again, if he doesn't believe in 2025 project, he doesn't believe in it. Caroline Sunshine, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.